I took the night job to pay for my studies. A quiet library, good pay, no distractions. But some nights, the books don't stay quiet, and neither does what hides behind them. If you enjoy dark, true horror stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because you never know who might be watching next. Back in my early 20s, the pressure was on. I was determined to further my education, but the costs were a looming shadow over my ambitions. I needed a job, a specific kind of job. It couldn't be the typical late-night retail or hectic food service gig that would leave me too drained to focus on my books. It had to be something that coexisted with my studies, not fought against them. Then I saw it. A vacancy notice for a library assistant, tucked in the corner of the community board. It felt like a sign. The quiet atmosphere, the proximity to knowledge, the structured silence. It was perfect. I applied with a hopeful heart, and to my delight, I got it. That library didn't just become my workplace. It became my sanctuary. I had been there for a few years by then, and the routine was a comfortable rhythm to my life. The best part was the unspoken perk. After the last patron had left and the doors were locked, I was allowed to stay. The grand, silent hall, with its talling shelves and the dusty, sweet scent of old paper, became my personal study hall. My education wasn't just uninterrupted, it was enhanced, nurtured within those very walls. My official duties were a mix of the mundane and the vigilant. During open hours, I was less a librarian and more a gentle guardian of the peace. My role was to watch the patrons, to maintain a subtle check-in balance, ensuring the silence was respected and the books were treated with care. When closing time came, a soft chime would signal the end of the day. People would trickle out on their own, lost in their thoughts, and the library would slowly empty into the evening quiet. Then the real routine began. My coworker and I would methodically walk the aisles, our footsteps echoing in the growing stillness. We'd reshelve stray books, straighten chairs, and wipe down tables. I'd then lock the heavy main doors with a satisfying, solid thud, sealing us in our paper fortress. The final task was to retreat to the main office, a small room lined with monitors flickering in the bluish dark. From there, I'd watch the camera feeds, my eyes tracing the empty aisles for any sign of movement, a silent sentinel for the sleeping knowledge. And I wasn't alone in this ritual. I had a companion, Sarah, the other assistant librarian. We were hired within weeks of each other, two newcomers navigating the quiet intricacies of the library world together. That shared starting point forged a quick friendship. We developed our own system, a silent language of nods and smiles during the day, and easy conversation during our shared closing duties. She was a calm, steadying presence. In the vast, often eerie quiet of the empty library, knowing I wasn't alone made all the difference. We were a team, the two of us, holding down the fort until morning. The evening had been perfectly, blessedly ordinary. We followed the closing ritual with the quiet efficiency of a well-rehearsed play. I made the final announcement, my voice bouncing softly off the distant ceiling. Patrons gathered their belongings and drifted out into the twilight. Then I began my meticulous closing sweep, a ritual that I had performed hundreds of times. I started at the far end of the history section, walking slowly down each aisle, my eyes scanning the spaces between the shelves, beneath the study carrels, and behind the reading nooks. The only sounds were the hum of the climate control and the soft scuff of my shoes on the polished floor. "All clear in fiction," Sarah's voice came softly over the walkie-talkie. "All clear in sciences," I responded. After a final 10-minute wait, a rule to catch any last-minute straggler, I engaged the heavy deadbolt on the main doors with a definitive clunk. The world was now locked out, and we were locked in. Sarah stayed on the main floor to finish shelving a cart of returns, while I retreated to the inner office, a glass-walled cube that looked out onto the central reading area. I spread my textbooks under the warm pool of my desk lamp, the silence a welcome companion to my studies. That's when the first sound cut through the calm. A dense, muffled thump from the direction of the classics aisle. It wasn't the gentle slap of a single book being dropped. It was the weighty, disordered collapse of several volumes hitting the carpet at once. I paused my pen, listening. Sarah must have knocked a stack over, I reasoned. I waited for the subsequent sounds of her picking them up. None came. Only silence, thicker and more profound than before. I was just forcing my focus back to my work when a new sound froze my blood in my veins. It was the quick, light, unmistakable percussion of footsteps. Not a walk, but a run, sprinting through the adjacent non-fiction section. In the absolute cathedral-like quiet of the closed library, every footfall was isolated and amplified, a stark violation of the space's very nature. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Who runs in a library? The thought was automatic, absurd. Sarah was many things, efficient, kind, patient, but she was never hurried. She moved with a librarian's deliberate grace. A spike of concern overrode my unease. Maybe she'd hurt herself. Maybe she'd seen a mouse and panicked. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice hesitant in the vast stillness. No answer. I stood up, the legs of my chair grating unnaturally loud against the floor. I stepped out of the office. The air felt colder. The main floor was a landscape of deep shadows and pools of dim emergency lighting. "Sarah," I called again, my voice firmer now. I walked the length of the non-fiction aisle, my heart beginning a low, steady drum against my ribs. It was empty. I checked biography, then periodicals. Nothing. A prickle of real fear traced a path down my spine. I hurried to the restroom and knocked sharply on the door. "Sarah, are you in there?" The door opened a moment later. Sarah stood there, looking at me with mild curiosity, wiping her damp hands on her trousers. "Yeah, everything okay?" "Were you just in non-fiction? I heard running." She blinked, her brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "Running? No. I've been in here for the past 15 minutes. I haven't even started on the shelving cart yet." Her words didn't just surprise me, they iced me to the core. The logic of my world tilted. If Sarah was here, and I was there, and who had I heard? Who had been running? The panic was no longer a knot, but a live wire buzzing through my limbs. The library no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a trap. I moved quickly now. My earlier calm sweep was replaced by a frantic search. I peered behind every shelf, jerked my head into every study nook, my breath coming in short, visible puffs in the chilled air. Aisle after aisle, shelf after shelf. Nothing. The library was, by every observable measure, empty except for the two of us. Back in the relative safety of the office, I tried to bury myself in my textbooks, but the words swam on the page. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was a held breath, a waiting presence. The memory of those running footsteps echoed in the hollow of my mind, a ghostly resonance that refused to fade. For the first time since I had started working there, the library felt deeply, terribly wrong. The attempt to study was a futile pantomime. My highlighter hovered over the text, but my senses were tuned to a different frequency entirely, the oppressive silence of the library. The initial shock had subsided into a low, humming dread, a constant background noise in my mind. For nearly half an hour I managed a fragile calm. The only sound was the soft rustle of a turning page. Then the atmosphere in the office shifted. It was a primal sensation, a tingling at the nape of my neck that raised the fine hairs on my arms, the distinct, unkerning feeling of being watched. It was a pressure, a weight from the other side of the glass wall which was covered by a long, heavy curtain for the night. I sat frozen, my pen clenched in my fist. I could feel a presence there. Just beyond the fabric, standing perfectly still. Gathering every ounce of courage, I spun my chair around in one sharp, jerky movement, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stared at the curtain, expecting to see a silhouette, a bulge in the fabric. There was nothing, just the static, dusty drape. I keyed the walkie-talkie, my voice a strained whisper. "Sarah, where are you right now?" Her voice crackled back, calm and oblivious. "Just finishing up in travel, near the back. Why, everything okay?" The relief was a physical wave, so potent it left me lightheaded. Yeah, just thought I heard something. It's nothing." It was my imagination, I told myself. The stress of the earlier sounds was making me paranoid. I took a deep, shuddering breath and tried to anchor myself back in reality. But the thirst that soon followed was undeniable, a dry itch in my throat that demanded attention. The walk to the staff cafeteria felt like a journey through a gauntlet. The library was a canyon of shadows, each one seeming to shift and deepen at the edge of my vision. I moved quickly, my footsteps too loud in the consuming quiet. I gulped down the water, the cold doing little to soothe the deeper chill inside me. It was on my return trip, as I passed the mouth of the philosophy aisle, that I saw it. A figure, a blur of stark clinical white that darted from one aisle to the next with an unnatural, fluid speed. It was there and then gone in the space of a single skipped heartbeat. I knew Sarah's library-issued coat was a deep, identifiable black. This was something else. This was wrong. A jolt of pure, undiluted adrenaline shot through me. "Hey!" I shouted, the word tearing from my throat as I broke into a run. I skidded to a halt at the intersection where I'd seen the shape. The aisle was perfectly still, perfectly empty. The air was cold and dead. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. Only silence answered. I was losing my mind. It had to be the shadows, my frayed nerves, a trick of the tired, low-wattage lights. Defeated and shaking, I turned to retreat to the office. That's when the crash came. It wasn't a simple tumble of books. It was a cataclysm, a roaring, percussive avalanche of sound that seemed to shake the very shelves, as if an entire section had been violently swept clean. The noise erupted from the literature wing, and this time there was no rationalizing it away. I ran, my fear now a secondary concern to the need for a concrete explanation. I rounded the corner into literature and stopped dead. The scene was one of deliberate chaos. Dozens of books were fanned across the carpet in a destructive spray, their spines cracked and pages splayed, and in the center of the devastation stood a woman. Her back was to me. She was tall and unnervingly still, as if the destruction around her was of no consequence. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun, and she was wearing a crisp, white uniform, a nurse's outfit, perhaps, or a server's, but it was devoid of any insignia, any badge, any identifying mark. It was just a void of white in the dim light. My professional training surfaced through the terror. "Excuse me," I said, my voice strained but firm. "The library is closed. You cannot be here. You need to leave immediately." She gave no indication she had heard me, not a twitch, not a turn of the head. Swallowing the lump of fear in my throat, I took a cautious step forward into the sea of fallen books. The air grew colder with each step. "Miss," I said, closer now. I reached out, my hand trembling violently, and lightly tapped her on the shoulder. The moment my fingers made contact with the stiff fabric of her uniform, she moved. It wasn't a normal turn. It was a slow, deliberate, mechanical pivot, as if on a rusted swivel. And then I saw her face. Her skin was pale and waxy, but it was her eyes that stopped my heart. They weren't wide with surprise or madness. They were calm, horribly calm. And her pupils? They were enormous, black and depthless, swallowing the irises whole. They were like twin pools of oil, reflecting the emergency light with a dull, lifeless sheen. There was no person behind those eyes. There was only a terrifying, predatory void. A silent scream caught in my throat. I stumbled backward, my shoes slipping on the scattered books. The moment I moved, her placid expression shattered. A grotesque, hungry intensity contorted her features. With a speed that was not human, she lunged for me. I didn't think. I spun and fled, a raw, animalistic terror propelling me forward. I could hear the swift, soft patter of her footsteps right behind me, gaining. I burst into the office, slammed the door shut, and fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb and clumsy. The bolt slid home just as a pale white shape appeared on the other side of the glass. I grabbed the walkie-talkie, my breath coming in ragged, hysterical sobs. "Sarah, there's a woman in here, a woman in a white uniform. Her eyes, she's not right. She's dangerous." "I'm coming." Sarah's voice was sharp with alarm. "No," I screamed into the receiver. "Stay where you are. Lock yourself in a closet. Do not come out. Do you hear me? She's not safe." As I spoke, the woman outside the door didn't pound or shout. She simply pressed her face against the glass. Those black, bottomless pupils fixed on me, unblinking. Her expression was one of cold, insatiable hunger, as if she were staring at her next meal. She was studying me, and the intelligence in that gaze was more terrifying than any mindless rage. I was trapped in my glass box, being devoured alive by that stare. Trembling so hard I could barely press the buttons, I dialed 911. "I'm on the night shift at the public library," I choked out, my voice cracking. "There's an intruder, a woman in a white uniform. Her eyes, they're all black. She's trying to get to me. Please, you have to come now. I'm locked in the office, but I can see her. She's just standing there, watching me." The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, to keep watching her, to describe what she was doing. It was then that the woman slowly turned away from the door and walked back to the center of the reading area. She didn't run. She moved with an eerie, ceremonial slowness. She sat down primly at one of the study tables, her back rod straight. And then she began to perform. Her hands moved in the air like unspooling something invisible, and a low, guttural whispering began to drift from her, just loud enough to be heard through the glass. It was a stream of nonsensical syllables, a language that sounded ancient and profane. She was sitting in my library, in the heart of my sanctuary, conducting a silent, mad symphony for an audience of one. The dispatcher's voice was a calm digital anchor in the roaring sea of my panic. "Units are 2 minutes out. Just keep watching her. Don't engage." My hand, slick with a cold sweat, trembled as I reached for the edge of the heavy office curtain. I peeled it back just an inch, creating a narrow window into the nightmare. The library's main reading area was bathed in the dim, soulless glow of the emergency lights, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and breathe. And there she was. She was seated perfectly upright in the center of the room at a study table usually occupied by earnest students. Her posture was unnervingly rigid, her hands moving with a strange, deliberate purpose on the table's surface. But there was nothing there. No book, no bag, no object of any kind. Yet her fingers performed an intricate pantomime. She was carefully, methodically unwrapping something invisible. She would peel back paper, fold it with ghostly precision, and set it aside, her attention wholly absorbed by the void in front of her. And the sounds, a low, continuous stream of whispers fell from her lips. It wasn't a language I recognized, not English, not anything from this world. It was a sibilant, guttural flow of syllables that slithered through the silence, occasionally punctuated by a wet, clicking sound from the back of her throat. The words, if they were words, felt ancient and soiled, a profane liturgy being recited in the heart of a place dedicated to quiet order. She was sitting in my library, in the heart of my sanctuary, conducting a silent, mad symphony for an audience of one. The dispatcher's voice was a calm digital anchor in the roaring sea of my panic. Units are 2 minutes out, just keep watching her, don't engage. My hand, slick with a cold sweat, trembled as I reached for the edge of the heavy office curtain. I peeled it back just an inch, creating a narrow window into the nightmare. The library's main reading area was bathed in the dim, soulless glow of the emergency lights, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and breathe. And there she was. She was seated perfectly upright in the center of the room at a study table usually occupied by earnest students. Her posture was unnervingly rigid, her hands moving with a strange, deliberate purpose on the table's surface. But there was nothing there. No book, no bag, no object of any kind. Yet her fingers performed an intricate pantomime. She was carefully, methodically unwrapping something invisible. She would peel back paper, fold it with ghostly precision, and set it aside, her attention wholly absorbed by the void in front of her. And the sounds, a low, continuous stream of whispers fell from her lips. It wasn't a language I recognized, not English, not anything from this world. It was a sibilant, guttural flow of syllables that slithered through the silence, occasionally punctuated by a wet, clicking sound from the back of her throat. The words, if they were words, felt ancient and soiled, a profane liturgy being recited in the heart of a place dedicated to quiet order. She was sitting in my library, in the heart of my sanctuary, conducting a silent, mad symphony for an audience of one. The dispatcher's voice was a calm digital anchor in the roaring sea of my panic. Units are 2 minutes out, just keep watching her, don't engage. My hand, slick with a cold sweat, trembled as I reached for the edge of the heavy office curtain. I peeled it back just an inch, creating a narrow window into the nightmare. The library's main reading area was bathed in the dim, soulless glow of the emergency lights, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and breathe. And there she was. She was seated perfectly upright in the center of the room at a study table usually occupied by earnest students. Her posture was unnervingly rigid, her hands moving with a strange, deliberate purpose on the table's surface. But there was nothing there. No book, no bag, no object of any kind. Yet her fingers performed an intricate pantomime.
She was carefully, methodically unwrapping something invisible. She would peel back paper, fold it with ghostly precision, and set it aside, her attention wholly absorbed by the void in front of her. And the sounds, a low, continuous stream of whispers fell from her lips. It wasn't a language I recognized, not English, not anything from this world. It was a sibilant, guttural flow of syllables that slithered through the silence, occasionally punctuated by a wet, clicking sound from the back of her throat. The words, if they were words, felt ancient and soiled, a profane liturgy being recited in the heart of a place dedicated to quiet order. She was sitting in my library, in the heart of my sanctuary, conducting a silent, mad symphony for an audience of one. The dispatcher's voice was a calm digital anchor in the roaring sea of my panic. Units are 2 minutes out, just keep watching her, don't engage. My hand, slick with a cold sweat, trembled as I reached for the edge of the heavy office curtain. I peeled it back just an inch, creating a narrow window into the nightmare. The library's main reading area was bathed in the dim, soulless glow of the emergency lights, casting long